where the test comes and you have to lean on what's been generated over time. So the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man lam yashkur bil qaleel, lam yashkur bil kathir." A person who's not grateful for small things is not going to suddenly become grateful for big things. And man lam yasbur, whoever is not patient with small things in life is not going to be patient with major tragedy in life. So you practice gratitude on a small scale. You practice patience on a small scale, so that when the blessing becomes bigger, you become more grateful. When the tragedy becomes bigger, you become more patient. You're able to always hone in on those qualities. One of the things that we learned from the Prophet ﷺ, it's really interesting. One of my teachers, Shaykh Rajah, Hafidahullah Ta'ala, one of the greatest hadith teachers I had, used to teach me Bukhari and Muslim. He loves Sahih Muslim because Sahih Muslim often has the zawa'at, the extra context to the same narration as Bukhari. And he pointed out something that really, really struck me. You know, the Prophet ﷺ taught us that when you're angry, you should say what? A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. How many times have you seen people in an argument, someone says, A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem? Or maybe they mean the other person's shaitan, right? But let's stop and make wudu. Let me take a break, make wudu, do dhikr. You know, disconnect. It's like, you know, in Arab culture, you say salli al Nabi. I've very rarely seen people stop and do salawats on the Prophet ﷺ in the middle of an argument, right? But here's the interesting thing about that hadith, and it was really, you know, he pointed out to us. He said, notice that the Prophet ﷺ saw a man that was raging. The Prophet ﷺ did not go up to him and say, hey, say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. The Prophet ﷺ told the other companions, I know a word that if he said it, his anger would subside. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Why? Because if the Prophet ﷺ actually went up to the man in the middle of his anger and said to him, say A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem, he might have blown up at the Prophet ﷺ. Then he'd be in a much bigger problem. Right? He'd be in a much worse predicament than the one that he was. The mercy of the Prophet ﷺ is that he let the man blow off his steam, and then you can tell him later what I said, so that next time he gets into a fit, he can control himself properly. So he said, subhanAllah, I mean, look at the wisdom of the Prophet ﷺ. So these are things we learn preemptively and practice consistently. So that when those times come, Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin wa ala ali Muhammad, astaghfirullah, a'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Let me go and make wudu. Let me be quiet. Let me take a break. Let me disconnect. Let me put my phone away. Let me not respond. These are things we learn preemptively and practice consistently. But you can't tell someone in the moment, you know, hey, do this. And of course we know, even the story of the woman who was in the graveyard and she was crying. And she was, you know, exceeding the bounds. The Prophet ﷺ told her to be patient. And she said to the Prophet ﷺ, what do you know of my situation? She didn't even look to see that it was the Prophet ﷺ telling her to be patient. Now, of course, you might just say, well, what about the previous situation and this one?